Welcome to Neighbor. My name is Lynn Coram. I'm your host today. And today my guest is Kathy Waters. Welcome.
Thank you.
For joining
Great
us.
to be here.
And Kathy, we'd like to start our shows with you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's my favorite topic, next to restorative justice. Restorative justice is my favorite topic. Well, I'm kind of new to Vermont. I moved up from New York City 2 years ago to join the staff at Youth Services, and I cannot tell you how great it is to be a part of this community.
How many years ago? A couple?
Two.
Two?
2 years, yeah.
From
I
New
think
York
the thing,
City.
yeah, I think the thing I'm impressed with the most is that, you know, working in social services, working with youth, to see a community that really does care and is proactive and wants to be involved is just heartening to people like me who do this work day in and day out. So it's really great to be here.
Did you do this work in New York City?
I did.
Uh-huh.
Yes, a little different.
Now, how did you get the connection? We think of Brattleboro as a relatively small town.
Yes.
And so how does someone from New York City get that
sanity to come here?
No, well, I would guess, you know, it's working in a smaller place is always easier than fighting traffic and all this stuff. But how did you know that? Did you want to come to New England? Did you see it in a trade magazine? How did that happen?
You know, actually, my brother's family lives in the area.
Oh,
and I kept visiting and visiting and visiting. And I was about to turn 50, and I thought, well, why? I could move. I could live here, you know. And I have to confess, when I moved here, I didn't understand the complexities of the challenges I would find with families here in this community. I sort of had a snobby view that, well, New York City, those are serious problems. Here I'll find, you know, cute little New England problems, you know. And what I'm learning still is the difference between what I was experiencing in the city and rural poverty. And the challenges that some of our families face, our neighbors, really, in a way, are much more challenging than inner city families because of the isolation and the lack of resources and just how expensive it is for places like Youth Services to reach out to these more isolated families.
It's expensive because you've got to drive miles to get there.
You've got to drive, and there's not a lot of resources to connect everybody to, and so you have smaller numbers with sort of a larger budget. However, if you don't, to me, it's a diversity issue. You know, these families are a part of our county, they're a part of our country, and if we don't look at rural families that are living in difficult circumstances, sort of shame on us.
So you see this as much a diversity issue as any race issue, or?
Absolutely.
And I find my experience, having been here probably 30 years, 32 years, is it's an economic diversity.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
That we face, the challenge.
That is exactly right. And I think sometimes the people who are not maybe living under those same kind of difficult circumstances don't always understand the complexities that some of our families are facing. But once people know about it, they're very willing to say, well, we can do better, we can pull together as a community.
Well, one of the things, and this is a little bit off restorative justice, but we have a half hour, we'll get to it, I think, is many people, one of the criticisms is if you go into families that are receiving all kinds of state and federal services, they have a bigger TV than you and I have. They have more, you know, gold jewelry than you and I have.
Yeah.
And is it a question of they don't have the money, or they don't? They have so much support from the state that they don't have to work. They do have disabilities that it seems like a lot of people have disabilities. You wonder how broad that area is. I mean, this is a hard area to sort of talk about, but what is it a choice of how you spend your money or your priorities in life?
You know, it's a fascinating topic, because what we find is that living in poverty is a very complex situation. You know, there are transportation issues, there are issues around literally depression, and sort of feeling like you're the loser, you're the outside of society. To health care, not getting good health care. having people in your family that haven't finished high school, so that's normal for you. And what that does to your economic future is profound. And sometimes, I know what you're talking about. I mean, I find that most of our families don't have big TVs and don't have more gold than I do. What they have is, sometimes you think, gosh, why are you choosing to, you know, make that purchase, whatever. Once in a while, I'll find that to be true. But it's sometimes because, like maybe all of us can sort of relate to, it's a way to feel valued and important, and I'm somehow connected. And so it is a challenge to help people sort of look at their lives and say, well, what makes sense for my family, and how do I put one foot in front of the other and put a lot of things together in order to really strengthen my family, because it's not easy. It's a domino effect. You know, one thing is off, it affects so many other parts of a life. Yeah,
well, if you spend your money on one thing, you might not have it to spend on buy gas to get you to the doctors on time.
And honestly,
but
I mean,
who made that choice?
Yeah, and usually the choice I find, Lynn, is can I go to the doctor, or can I keep the electricity on? You know,
really?
Absolutely.
Even with
absolutely.
the Medicaid expansion, the Catamount expansion we've had.
Yeah, the poverty is a real issue in our county. Absolutely, real poverty. Absolutely, yeah. With all the services, there really aren't enough services, and sometimes it's a matter of maneuvering through the system, and how can I really get the help I need, and how does that fit with who I am? You know, what works in my family.
You know, it's odd, because when Catamount Health came out, which was supposed to catch those people who had slipped through the cracks, not the very poorest of the poor, but sort of, they earned enough but did not earn enough to be able to afford health insurance, which is very expensive.
Absolutely.
Because of all the mandates and the rules that have been put on it.
Yep.
But what they've spent, I know Catamount has spent probably as much money advertising the program, trying to get people to know about it,
That's right.
that have signed up. And I just saw a thing nationally where there's also a national piece where they expected, now the health agency expected 300,000+ people to have signed up by now, up for this program right now to help them. Only 8,000 have signed up.
You know, and Lynn, we see that, and it's kind of interesting.
So the money's there, the program support's there, but the disconnect.
Yes, that's a good word, I think. And I think youth services is a great place to help people connect.
Because you really are there.
Yeah, we're really there, and we're really going to, meet you where you are. You know, I'm not going to tell you what I think works from my perspective. I'm going to really learn about you and what's going to work from your perspective. And many times it's about making those connections, especially in the restorative justice programs that we run, because what we're looking at there is saying, well, what are the underlying issues in your life that you need help with? And it could be something like, gosh, you haven't signed up for this health care that would really help your family. Or did you know about this program? Or how can we help you access this? I tell you, though, it is a challenge, because sometimes, well, how do I get there? What kind of child care do I have? It's tough. There's a lot of challenges that some of these families are really facing.
Well, let's get to restorative justice.
Yes.
What are the goals of the program?
Restorative justice it's one of my most favorite philosophies, I would say. Restorative justice is a way to look at problems that says, let's not look only at the crime that was committed, right, in the court diversion program that we run, and in the program that we run for youth that are on probation. So there's been a crime. Let's also look more at sort of the behavior that happened there, and let's see what was the harm done by that behavior, by breaking that law, in terms of the victim, in terms of the community. What harm has been done to the community, and even what harm has been done to oneself who made this mistake, so that I don't have to do it again. I can learn how not to do that again. And so it's like a triangle, restorative justice. It's very powerful, and I think, frankly, it's far more effective than some just more traditional approaches in our juvenile, or in any kind of criminal system, whether it be with juveniles or with adults. It's just fascinating to see it at work. It really is.
So the goals are to examine all those pieces.
Yeah.
And then, but your goal on the out is so that recidivism is not a factor.
There's really two goals. Well, there's a few goals, I'm going to say. One goal is, in fact, to assist our court system, which is under a lot of stress these days, to divert sort of lower level cases so we're not bogging down the courts with some of these cases, that we can handle them at youth services in our court diversion restorative justice programs. The other goal is to say, let's look at repairing harm done rather than just sort of a punitive approach that's kind of simplistic in a way. Let's really look at how does one repair the harm that was done, both to the, sort of the obvious victim, but also some people that they might not have thought of as victims, and as to the community. And then let's look at the underlying issues so that so that the mistake is not made again.
Okay.
That's the recidivism rate that you're speaking of. So there's kind of about three things we're trying to accomplish.
Okay. How did restorative justice begin? Where did it come from? And how long ago?
You know, restorative justice has roots in some wonderful stories. Actually, Canada, believe it or not, is sort of at the cutting edge of restorative justice. And some people think when they hear restorative justice, they think of South Africa. And at the end of apartheid, there was really, under Desmond Tutu's leadership, a real restorative justice approach for putting that country sort of back together and how do we live together now, not under apartheid. Vermont, I'm proud to say, is very much at the forefront of restorative justice in our country, and our legislators actually made a real commitment to the restorative justice process several years back, and youth services has been a part of that from the very beginning. And again, it really is saying, what's really going to work here? You know, it's one thing to say, if we all look at what we spend under the Department of Justice budget, it's a lot of money. You know, what it costs to have someone in the court system and even in the prison system is just an enormous amount of money, not to mention the human toll that takes. So to say, hey, let's invest some money on sort of the early front to avoid that just makes sense from so many perspectives.
Yeah. So Canada's been the leader, but how many years do you think?
You know, restorative justice has been around literally in Native American communities, you know,
a long time.
Yeah, a long time.
So basically, it's probably one of those little, like, who invented the wheel kind of thing.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. Yeah.
Okay, take us through the steps. If a person has committed, and it has to be a criminal offense, it cannot be a civil offense. Is
Well,
that true?
we do have a program called Teen Alcohol Safety Program, and when a person between the age of 16 and 20 is found consuming or in possession of alcohol illegally, then that's actually a civil program that they get a chance to come through youth services in a restorative justice process to avoid civil consequences, losing their license, their insurance going up, so forth and so on. So we're going to try to intervene early and do like a real quality drug and alcohol assessment. You know, is this a young person that's on a road to real abuse or addiction? Is this someone that needs some education? So it's wonderful. Of all the people that come through and receive assessments through our restorative justice programs, 14% are found to need follow-up treatment. So that is great to have that happen early in a person's life rather than...
So 14% are showing signs that they will have addiction problems.
Exactly, that they're really headed to... It is big. It really is. And think of the impact on their families, on you and I just driving down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So it's wonderful. But most of them, you're right, it is in the criminal side of things, whether it's district court, family court. And what happens is the state's attorney works with attorneys like Jesse Corum, who really is at the forefront of the restorative justice here at Youth Services, for sure.
I had no idea.
Yeah, isn't that great?
That's I learned so much on these little talks.
Absolutely. Yeah. You know, and really there's a lot of history within the program, but basically what happens is the state's attorney speaks to someone, looks at the offense or looks at the situation and says, hey, we would like to offer you the option of court diversion, let's say. And then what we do at Youth Services is we talk with that person, and if the person is under 18, with the parent or the guardian as well, and we say, so here's the deal. In court diversion, we want you to take responsibility for your action. Now, you're not taking legal responsibility at that point, because if you end up in court, then you can still plead guilty, not guilty, whatever. But if you're coming to court diversion, the very first thing is, yes, I do take responsibility for this action, this offense that has, the law has been violated. And then we take you through a process with the staff first, and then with a board of community members that volunteer their time. And we say, tell us what happened. From your perspective, tell us the story of what happened. Tell us what happened that day in the morning. What was your day like? What was your thinking?
What were the triggers?
What were the triggers? That's a great way to say it. And then we begin to hear the hints of how we can intervene here in a way that makes sense. We also can give some clarifying thoughts to the person. I recently had a person come in, and he was talking about, he was going through a rough patch in life. He had an altercation with a neighbor. He had been drinking at the time, and his stress level was very high about some personal things going on. And he wasn't necessarily drawing the connection with, possibly if he hadn't been drinking, this wouldn't have happened. And so we just sort of planted some seeds in his mind. Well, what do you think if you hadn't been drinking? And, is that
decision's been different? Yeah.
Exactly. And so you're sort of asking those questions and giving that feedback. And then what happens in the board with these community volunteers is, with the person who's done the offense, a contract has made that says, all right, here's how I'm going to repair the harm done to the victim, to the community, and to look at my own underlying issues. And then the staff continues to work with that person to hopefully be successful in completing that contract. Thereby, they avoid court system altogether, and it's like the case goes away. You get to sort of have a clean slate.
Does it go away at the end of that diversion process, or does it go away? Are you sort of like on a little probation period?
You're not really on probation. It's sealed after 2 years for good, but basically you have completed court diversion. So on that case, you're not going to have to go back to court for that at all. Yeah.
Well, what's interesting is when you're relating this person's story about drinking and so forth. I think you probably drink. What Spurs drinking is, it's a way of feeling in control of something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And just dealing with that stress, which of course makes it more stressful, but
it feels different.
Yeah, yeah.
And so if you know that's coming, you can now get some tools to deal with the problem first.
That's right.
Realize you're in control more doing that.
That's right.
Than
Absolutely.
the other piece, and a better result would be had.
Absolutely. I'm thinking of another case, 13-year-old girl. She was caught shoplifting, and she was as nervous as can be. But what we did with her is we took her we worked all this out, obviously, but the staff, we took her to the shop, and she met with the owners. And these owners helped her. Very powerful. Yeah. These owners made it real for her. They said to her, you know what? I had to go to a trade show to pick that thing that you stole out of all the other things. I had to choose that one to have in my store. Then now it's in the store. When you stole it, my clerk had to deal with calling the police and all that unpleasantness. And now even when other young people come into our store, we look at them a little. So you've actually impacted your peers even. And it was very hard for this young girl. But she listened and she understood, okay, here's the harm that I've done here, which is more than I thought of when I just stole this little thing. And she was a nervous wreck, but she had written an apology letter with the help of the staff. And at first she didn't want to read it herself. She said, she asked me, could I read it? And I said, well, let's look at it together. But she found enough sort of confidence in herself that she did read it. And so here she did. She apologized for stealing this item out of the store. That's a big moment in a 13-year-old's life.
Yeah, it should impact pretty much.
Yeah,
I think.
And it really was an example of the restorative process in action, so to speak. Yeah.
I just read I think it was in the Commons, this past week's Commons, a piece on restorative justice, and compared a child picked up in New Zealand, or in an abusive situation in New Zealand, shot his father, killed his father, and then in the United States, a similar situation, and they restorative justice in New Zealand, which basically helped him work back and become a member of the community rather than putting him in jail.
And that's an extreme case, but I tell you what, I remember seeing that.
And the one in Vermont didn't do that.
That's right.
And the person's still in jail.
Yeah, and obviously that's an extreme case. It reminds me of a film that I saw about restorative justice. And this community that really had embraced the process, there was a teenager that was just known to cause trouble. And sure enough, he was arrested for something. I don't remember what the violation was. And there was this adult doing the interview said, I was glad. Like, he finally got caught. Oh, good. I can give him my peace of my mind. And so he was a part of the restorative justice group of community members to meet with this teenager. And another member of the community said to other people, all right, how many of us know the family situation of this teenage boy? Well, everyone knew. And it was very sad and very tough. And then she said, how many of us have seen him wandering the streets with nowhere really to go? Everyone had. And how many of us invited him in for dinner to join our family for a meal? So it just sort of says, as a community, there's a certain response and responsibility that we can, not that we take responsibility for the behavior of the person, you don't want to dumb it down and say, oh, poor you, it's okay, you did a bad thing. That's really saying, I don't believe in you. That, you don't want to set the bar that low for anyone. But in addition to saying you have to take responsibility, it's sort of saying, you know what, let's all pull together and in some way take responsibility for the people who live in our community.
Yeah, let me go back because it ties in with what you just said. The article which had the New Zealand child and I think it was a Vermont child, they were under abusive parental situations, and everyone knew it.
Exactly.
And no one did anything about it.
And what do we think is? I mean,
and then we're surprised when someone tries to defend themselves and ends up having to shoot their father. So,
exactly.
That's the abuse.
I mean, we hear just heartbreaking stories day in and day out. I think it's why so many of our volunteers on the restorative justice panels, some of them have done it for years and years, and they're all different people in the community, because to hear people's, it's like a sort of almost a sacred thing to hear someone's story, and to hear it with respect, not let me shake my, and judge you, but to listen to the person with a sense of respect and accountability. It's never dull, this particular volunteer position. So we have people who stick with it for years and years and years. And it's really great to see them give back in that way.
But the piece is, and I think what Youth Services also helps do, is that intervener.
Yes.
If you know something's going on.
Yes.
And often, you hear still those situations slip through the cracks, and social services knows about them and doesn't do anything.
You bet.
And how can we expect a person to... I don't want someone to use that as an excuse for their behaviors.
That's right.
I think a lot of people are tired of that.
Absolutely.
Oh, what his background is, we have to have understanding. No, we don't. To the point where we, say...
It's both. Yeah.
You're
it's
free
that
to go offend
no.
again because we understand.
No. No.
No one's going... We're not going to...
And that's an insulting response for the person. It really does say, I don't believe in you at all, you poor thing.
I think it does, but it's been a process. It's been out there.
It does happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But how do we, if we are community awareness, and do you call Youth Services and say, I think that there is a situation in my neighborhood?
Oh, absolutely.
And that you get calls like that?
Oh, absolutely. We have a 24-hour crisis line if people are in crisis, or certainly just call during regular work hours to talk through any situation. I mean, we really have programs that deal with families with young children. We have Big Brothers, Big Sisters. We, of course, have the restorative justice programs through court diversion and through our Barge program working with kids on probation. I mean, we run the gamut, with some of the hardest families, really the most heartbreaking stories in our communities. Those families are ours,
Yeah.
And so absolutely people call and should call Youth Services, and we'd be more than glad to.
And what is the phone number?
The phone number is 257-0361, and it's youthservicesinc.org if you'd like to go on our website.
Okay.
Yeah, and we do have a satellite office in Bellows Falls too. So remember, it is county-wide, and even if we'll help you find something even if you're outside the county. But it's just really important to be able to do what you say, like what is available, and how can we connect people, and how can we connect caring people who want to make a difference too. The other way, how can we have people involved in? I think Neighbor to Neighbor says it's great. These are our neighbors.
Yeah, and we all have responsibility. I mean, we all suffer from the criminal activity or the violations on the road,
Absolutely.
or anything, or children that aren't cared for in the future. That's all an impact that costs society loss of treasure and lives.
I like to say you can pay me now or you can pay me later. Why not do early intervention? There was a great panel, a young man. Also living in difficult circumstances, frankly, out of sheer boredom. He broke, some of his buddies and him, he broke into a bunch of houses in their neighborhood, right, and just sort of wreaked havoc. And he was in front of a bunch of adults who he never would have met or spoke with otherwise. And this one man, you know, sort of an elegant man, again, never would have talked to, looked at him and said, you know, I have to tell you, I live in the same community. And he said, I just was at a barbecue with neighbors, and we were talking about how much we love living here, we don't lock our doors, and how safe we feel. And so he looked at this teenage boy and he said, you know, now I feel less safe. And so for a teenager, that was a moment where it became more human and real to him.
Well, he also realized, that teenager, that he has power and he can choose to use it for good or for evil.
And they do have power to, that is for good. That's why we do community service. We say, hey, give back to the community in a positive way. You've done something and you've had a negative effect on our community. You've broken this law. Now go and have a positive effect. Find something that you care about, animals or you know, working with the elderly or working with whatever, and give back. Do some community service. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of hours are given back in this restorative justice process every year through these services.
Do you find that the community service seems to change lives as much? Is it an important piece?
It absolutely has that ability. I have seen that happen. We had a young man actually decide he wanted to pursue the career of working with animals because of he was kind of a lost soul, you know, just sort of bouncing around. And through community service, he found this sort of passion and goal. It was great, you know.
That's terrific. Well, the animals are actually would be a good piece because they'll never reject you.
It's true. It's that unconditional love that sometimes we don't
it's
get.
Purest almost. Yeah. From animals.
And caring for something else.
Yes.
Other than myself, you know.
Yeah. So, what I think that's we were nearing the end of our interview. Is there any other information that we should know about restorative justice? How often do the panels meet?
There are different panels. Usually, each panel meets once a month. So if anyone's interested in applying for a volunteer position, they can certainly call us. Or if you'd like to make a donation, we're getting more and more people who are truly, truly indigent, like homeless individuals who maybe have dumpster diving, that kind of thing. And so we have to have donations available to help that person actually be able to access the program. There's lots of different ways that people can be a part of this, but it's just it's one of these things that just works. It makes sense from everyone's perspective, and I love it. And the people who are involved with the process, I think, will tell you the same exact thing.
Great. Well, thank you so much for sharing the information on this program with us, Kathy. It's great to meet you, and I welcome you to the community.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And always nice to know that energetic people are coming to help us in any way, and we all work together.
I'm thrilled to be here.
It's great. And we thank you for watching. You've been watching Neighbor to Neighbor. My name is Lynn Corum. I've been here with Kathy Waters with the Youth Services Restorative Justice Program, and we hope to see you on our next show.